When people hear the word monster, they flinch. They imagine something reckless, destructive, out of control, and that reaction tells us something important about how we've been conditioned. We've been taught to fear strength when it isn't softened, to distrust intensity when it isn't explained, to label power as dangerous instead of asking how it's being used. But the real danger is not strength itself. The real danger is strength that is never developed, never acknowledged, never disciplined. Because here is the truth most people avoid. Every human being has the capacity for power, physical power, mental power, emotional power, the ability to influence, to endure, to dominate a situation when necessary. And when that capacity is ignored or suppressed, it doesn't disappear. It leaks out sideways. It shows up as resentment, passive aggression, fear, or quiet self-sabotage. We tell ourselves we are being good when in reality we are just being small. Becoming a monster starts with an honest conversation with yourself, not the polite version, not the version you show the world, the real one, the one that admits I want more, the one that admits I'm angry about what happened, the one that admits I am capable of far more than I'm currently allowing myself to become. Most people never have that conversation because it's uncomfortable. Because once you admit your potential, you're also forced to admit your responsibility. If you know you could be stronger but choose not to be, that's a decision. If you know you could lead but stay silent, that's a decision. If you know you could protect, build, or change something but hide behind comfort, that's a decision. A monster is not someone who loses control. A monster is someone who gains it. True power is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It's quiet, steady, and patient. And that kind of power only comes from discipline, from doing the hard things long before anyone is watching, from training yourself to act based on principles instead of impulses, from choosing what is right over what is easy again and again and again. Here's where the misunderstanding happens. People think being strong means being aggressive. They think intensity means anger. They think danger means violence. But real danger is competence combined with conviction. It's the person who knows exactly what they're capable of and chooses restraint. It's the person who could cause damage but doesn't. Unless the moment truly demands it, think about the people you trust the most. Truly trust. They're not fragile. They're not naive. They're not harmless. They are grounded, calm, measured. They don't panic under pressure. They don't crumble when challenged. That's not softness, that's strength under control. And control doesn't come from denying your darker emotions. It comes from understanding them. Anger, for example, is not the enemy. Anger is information. It tells you something matters. It tells you a boundary has been crossed. The problem isn't anger. The problem is anger without direction. When you ignore it, it turns inward. When you indulge it, it becomes destructive. But when you harness it, when you give it purpose, it becomes fuel. The same is true for pain. Pain is not meant to define you, but it can refine you. Every setback, every rejection, every moment you felt overlooked or underestimated, those moments carry energy. Most people waste that energy by numbing it, escaping it, or pretending it didn't affect them. The monster does something different. The monster says, "This will make me sharper. This will make me stronger. This will make me more prepared." Redefining what it means to be a monster requires courage because it goes against the story we've been told. The story says good people are passive. The story says strong people are dangerous. The story says ambition is selfish and intensity is a flaw. But history doesn't move forward because of people who played it safe. Families don't stay protected because of people who avoid responsibility. Change doesn't happen because of people who wait until they feel ready. It happens because someone decided to become capable. Capability is uncomfortable. It demands effort. It demands sacrifice. It demands that you stop blaming circumstances and start building capacity to work longer, capacity to think deeper, capacity to carry more weight without breaking. And here's the key shift. Becoming a monster is not about becoming feared. It's about becoming reliable. Reliable in a crisis. Reliable when things fall apart. Reliable when leadership is required and excuses won't work anymore. When you redefine monster, this way it stops being about ego. It stops being about proving something to the world. It becomes about alignment. About making sure your internal strength matches the external challenges you face, about knowing that if life pushes harder tomorrow, You won't collapse, you'll adapt. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they lack the willingness to develop their edge. They want the results of strength without the discomfort of building it. They want respect without responsibility, confidence without competence. Becoming a monster is choosing a different path. It's choosing to train when you don't feel like it. It's choosing honesty over image. It's choosing long-term meaning over short-term comfort. And once you redefine the monster this way, something interesting happens. You stop fearing yourself. You stop doubting whether you're enough because you know, not hope, not wish, but know, that if things get hard, you can handle it. That confidence doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from earned belief. And earned belief is the foundation of everything that comes next. There is a moment in every meaningful journey when comfort stops working, not because comfort is bad, but because it has done all it can do. It has kept you safe. It has kept you stable. It has kept you alive. But it has also quietly kept you small. And if you listen closely, you can feel it. That low hum of dissatisfaction, that sense that you are capable of more than the life you are currently living. That feeling is not ingratitude. It is awareness. Becoming a monster begins when you stop confusing comfort with security. Comfort is familiar. Security is earned. Comfort avoids risk. Security is built through capability, and the world has a way of testing this distinction at the worst possible moments. When something breaks, when someone depends on you, when the plan falls apart and there is no instruction manual, in those moments, comfort offers nothing. Only capacity does. Most people hope those moments never come. They build lives designed to avoid pressure. They choose paths that minimize responsibility. They say no to challenges not because they can't do them, but because they might fail. And slowly over time, they trade resilience for convenience. They don't notice it happening until life asks more of them than they have prepared to give. A monster prepares before the moment arrives. Preparation is not glamorous. It doesn't look impressive from the outside. It often feels lonely. It means doing the uncelebrated work, repeating the boring fundamentals, saying no to distractions that everyone else says yes to. It means choosing discipline on days when motivation is nowhere to be found. And this is where most people stop because discipline feels restrictive. It feels like a loss of freedom. But discipline is not a loss of freedom. It is the price of future freedom. The ability to choose how you respond under pressure is not accidental. It is trained. The ability to stay calm when others panic is not a personality trait. It is practiced. The ability to make hard decisions with clarity is not luck. It is the result of hours, days, and years spent strengthening your inner foundation. Becoming a monster means accepting that no one is coming to save you, not because the world is cruel, but because responsibility is the gateway to meaning. When you take full ownership of your actions, your growth, your standards, something shifts. You stop waiting, you stop blaming, you stop negotiating with your potential. And here is the paradox: the more responsibility you accept, the more empowered you become. Most people want empowerment without obligation. They want influence without accountability. They want authority without the burden of decision-making. But power without responsibility is reckless. It creates damage. It creates distrust. That is not the kind of monster the world needs. The monster the world needs is dangerous to the problem, not to the people. Dangerous to chaos, dangerous to injustice, dangerous to excuses. This kind of monster does not seek dominance. It seeks impact. It does not need to win every argument. It needs to uphold its values, especially when doing so is costly. Values are not words you say when it's easy. They are behaviors you choose when it's hard. And this is where control becomes essential. Without control, strength becomes a liability. Without control, intensity becomes instability. Without control, ambition becomes arrogance. Control is what turns raw power into reliable force. It is what allows you to hold the line when emotions surge. It is what keeps you grounded when success arrives. It is what prevents you from becoming the very thing you once resented. Control is built by knowing your why, not as a slogan, not as a motivational phrase, but as a lived principle. When you know why you are doing what you're doing, temptation loses its grip. Distractions lose their appeal. Shortcuts lose their shine, because you are not driven by impulse. You are guided by purpose. Purpose does not make the journey easier. It makes it clearer. Clarity is what allows a monster to say no when everyone else says yes. It's what allows patience in a world addicted to speed. It's what allows restraint in moments where reaction would feel satisfying but costly. This kind of clarity is rare because it requires reflection, it requires honesty, it requires the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about who you are and who you are not. Yet, becoming a monster also means redefining success, not as applause, not as status, not as being seen, but as consistency, as integrity, as the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your actions align with your principles. Success becomes waking up knowing you didn't betray yourself the day before. That kind of success doesn't trend, it doesn't go viral, but it lasts. And when setbacks come, because they will, the monster does not collapse into self-pity. It assesses, it adjusts, it learns. Failure becomes feedback, not a verdict. The monster understands that growth is not linear, and progress does not require perfection. It requires persistence. There is also humility in becoming a monster. Real strength does not need to dominate every room. It listens, it learns, it adapts. It understands that there is always more to know, more to refine, more to improve. Arrogance is often the mask of insecurity. The monster has no need for masks. And finally, becoming a monster means choosing to stand when it would be easier to blend in, to speak when silence would be safer, to act when hesitation feels justified, not recklessly, not emotionally, but deliberately, with intention, because the world does not change through wishful thinking. It changes when capable individuals step forward and take responsibility for what they can influence. Families become stronger, teams become better, communities become safer. Not because everyone was nice, but because someone was strong enough to care and disciplined enough to act. So if you feel that pull towards something more demanding, more meaningful, more challenging, don't ignore it. That pull is not asking you to become ruthless. It's asking you to become capable. Become the kind of monster who can be trusted with power, the kind who chooses restraint over reaction, the kind who uses strength in service of something that matters. Because in a world that often rewards noise over substance, the most dangerous thing you can become is someone who is prepared, principled, and unshakable. At some point, the conversation stops being about what you want and becomes about who you are willing to become. That is the quiet turning point most people miss. They stay focused on outcomes, more success, more recognition, more freedom, without realizing that outcomes are simply the byproduct of identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. And standards are not what you say out loud. They are what you refuse to compromise when no one is watching. Becoming a monster is not a sudden transformation. It is not a dramatic moment where everything changes overnight. It is a series of small, unglamorous decisions made consistently over time. Decisions to do the work when it feels invisible. Decisions to hold yourself accountable when no one else will. Decisions to keep your word to yourself, especially when breaking it would be easy and convenient. Most people underestimate how much trust they lose with themselves. Every time you say you'll do something and don't, something erodes inside. Not loudly, quietly. Confidence doesn't disappear in one moment. It leaks away through repeated self-betrayal. And when confidence is gone, people look for motivation, inspiration, or external validation to fill the gap. But none of those things can replace self-trust. A monster is someone who rebuilds that trust from the inside out. Self-trust is built through evidence, through action, through showing yourself again and again that you can rely on who you are becoming. That when it gets uncomfortable, you don't immediately escape. That when it gets difficult, you don't instantly rationalize. You stay, you engage, you endure. Endurance is an underrated skill in a world obsessed with speed. We celebrate quick wins, overnight success, and instant results. But endurance is what carries you through the long stretches where progress is slow and feedback is minimal. Endurance is what keeps you moving when the excitement fades and only commitment remains. This is where many people quit, not because they can't do the work, but because the work stops rewarding them emotionally. Becoming a monster means learning to operate without applause. It means detaching your sense of worth from immediate results. It means understanding that some of the most important work you will ever do will never be seen or celebrated by anyone else, and yet it matters. The monster understands something most people don't. Discipline creates identity. When you consistently do hard things, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start asking, "What is required?" That shift changes everything. It moves you from doubt to responsibility, from hesitation to action, and responsibility is heavy. It means you can't hide behind excuses anymore. You can't blame circumstances, timing, or other people for your lack of progress. You acknowledge reality as it is, not as you wish it were, and then you respond accordingly. This is not pessimism. This is clarity. Clarity is empowering. When you see things clearly, you stop wasting energy fighting reality. You stop arguing with facts. You stop wishing for different conditions and start preparing for the conditions you have. That preparation is what makes you formidable, not aggressive, not arrogant, formidable. A formidable person does not need to threaten. Their presence alone creates confidence. People feel safer around them. They trust them with responsibility. They listen when they speak. That influence is not demanded. It is earned. Becoming a monster also requires emotional maturity, not emotional suppression, but emotional regulation. You feel deeply, but you do not let feelings dictate your behavior. You understand that emotions are temporary, but decisions can be permanent. So you pause, you breathe, you choose. In moments of conflict, the monster does not rush to win. It seeks to understand, not to be passive, but to be precise. Precision matters because power without precision is wasteful. It creates collateral damage. Precision allows you to act decisively without unnecessary harm. This level of control is rare because it requires humility. It requires admitting when you're wrong. It requires learning from feedback instead of defending your ego. It requires the courage to evolve rather than cling to an outdated version of yourself. Growth demands identity updates. The monster does not say, "This is just who I am." It says, "This is who I am becoming." That subtle difference keeps the door open to improvement. It allows you to adapt as life changes, as responsibilities increase, as stakes rise, and stakes will rise. As you grow more capable, more will be expected of you. People will rely on you. Your decisions will matter to others, not just yourself. This is where values become non-negotiable, because when pressure increases, character is revealed, not in the big, dramatic moments, but in the small choices that accumulate over time. Becoming a monster means deciding in advance what you stand for, what lines you will not cross, what shortcuts you will not take even if they promise faster results. This pre-commitment protects you when temptation is strongest and judgment is weakest. It also protects the people around you. The most dangerous monsters in history were not strong. They were unprincipled. They had power without purpose, influence without ethics. That is not the path. Strength must be anchored to something deeper than ambition. It must serve a cause beyond self-interest. When your strength is rooted in service, something shifts. Your work gains meaning, your sacrifices feel justified, your discipline feels worthwhile. You are no longer grinding for ego, you are building for impact. And impact is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like consistency, sometimes it looks like showing up when it's inconvenient, sometimes it looks like making the right decision when no one will ever know you did. But you will know, and that knowledge shapes you. So becoming a monster, in the truest sense, is becoming someone who can be trusted with pressure, with responsibility, with power. Someone who does not collapse under stress or inflate under praise. Someone who remains steady, principled, and deliberate regardless of circumstances. That kind of monster does not need to announce itself. It is recognized by its actions. There comes a point where the work you've been doing on yourself begins to ask a harder question. Not can you be strong, disciplined, and capable, but why you choose to be. Because strength without direction eventually turns inward. Discipline without meaning becomes hollow, and capability without purpose feels empty, no matter how impressive it looks from the outside. This is where becoming a monster moves beyond self-improvement and into responsibility. When you grow stronger, you don't just gain options, you gain influence. People watch what you do, even when they don't say it. They measure what's possible by what you tolerate, what you allow, what you stand up for. And whether you realize it or not, your behavior gives others permission. Permission to cut corners. Permission to rise to the challenge. Permission to stay small. Leadership is not a title. It's the shadow your actions cast on others. A monster understands this weight and chooses not to ignore it. Most people want influence without realizing influence is not about being followed, it's about being accountable. When your decisions affect others, the margin for self-indulgence shrinks. You can't afford to be ruled by mood, ego, or impulse. You can't say one thing and do another. Consistency stops being optional because inconsistency erodes trust. And trust is the foundation of everything that lasts. Trust is built when people know what to expect from you. Not because you're predictable, but because you're principled. Principles are anchors. They hold you steady when pressure rises. They prevent you from drifting toward convenience when the cost of integrity feels high. Without principles, strength becomes reactive. With principles, strength becomes reliable. This is why becoming a monster is not about dominance. It's about dependability. Dependable people are rare. They show up when it's uncomfortable. They speak up when silence would be safer. They follow through when enthusiasm fades. Over time, this reliability compounds. People lean on it. Systems form around it. Responsibility finds it. And with responsibility comes temptation. The temptation to cut corners because you've earned it. The temptation to justify behavior because results are good. The temptation to believe you are the exception. This is where many strong people fail. Not because they lack ability, but because they lose humility. They forget that the same discipline that built their strength is the discipline required to maintain it. They start to believe the rules are for others, that their intentions excuse their actions, that outcomes matter more than process. A monster does not fall into this trap because a monster remembers the cost of becoming capable in the first place. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is remembering what made you strong. It is staying connected to the work, not just the rewards. It is staying curious instead of defensive. Humility keeps growth alive. Growth, after all, never ends. The moment you believe you've arrived is the moment you stop listening. And when you stop listening, you stop learning. And when you stop learning, your strength stagnates. Stagnant strength becomes brittle, and brittle things break under pressure. Becoming a monster means committing to continuous refinement, to asking better questions, to seeking feedback not as an attack, but as data, to understanding that the goal is not to be right, but to be effective. Effectiveness requires perspective. Perspective allows you to see beyond the immediate moment, to weigh short-term gain against long-term consequence, to recognize that winning the argument might cost you the relationship, that proving a point might undermine trust, that speed might sacrifice sustainability. The monster thinks in horizons, not impulses. This long-term thinking is what allows restraint to feel powerful instead of frustrating. It's what allows patience to feel strategic instead of passive. It's what allows silence to feel intentional instead of weak. In a world that rewards reaction, restraint stands out. And restraint is often misunderstood as softness. But softness avoids discomfort. Restraint chooses discomfort in service of something greater. It chooses the harder right over the easier wrong. It chooses alignment over applause. Becoming a monster also means accepting that not everyone will understand your choices. Some will misinterpret your silence. Some will resent your standards. Some will feel threatened by your refusal to participate in chaos. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're no longer governed by the need for approval. Approval is addictive. It feels good in the moment, but it erodes independence over time. The monster learns to replace approval with alignment, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing their actions match their values, even when no one claps. That alignment becomes a compass, and when things go wrong, because they will, the monster does not look for someone to blame. It looks for what can be learned. Blame feels relieving, but it is disempowering. Learning is uncomfortable, but it is liberating. Every mistake becomes an opportunity to refine judgment, to strengthen systems, to clarify standards. This mindset transforms failure from a threat into a teacher. It also transforms success into responsibility. When things go right, the monster does not become careless. It becomes more deliberate. It understands that success raises expectations, and expectations raise stakes, so it doubles down on fundamentals, on preparation, on values, on consistency, because the higher you rise, the more damage a fall can cause, not just to you, but to those who depend on you. Becoming a monster is ultimately about stewardship. Stewardship of your abilities, stewardship of your influence, Stewardship of the trust others place in you. It's recognizing that strength is not owned, it is borrowed. Borrowed from the sacrifices you made, from the people who supported you, from the standards you upheld, and borrowed things must be cared for. So the monster does not chase recognition, it chases reliability. It does not seek to be admired, it seeks to be useful. It does not measure success by how it feels in the moment, but by how well it holds up over time. That kind of monster is rare, and that is exactly why it matters. Eventually, everything comes back to a choice. Not a dramatic one, not a public one, a quiet, private decision made over and over again. The decision to choose control over comfort, because comfort feels good in the moment. But control is what shapes a life that lasts. Control over your habits, control over your reactions, control over the standards you live by when no one is keeping score. Most people don't fail because they make bad decisions. They fail because they make comfortable ones. They choose what soothes instead of what strengthens. They choose relief instead of growth. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, comfort becomes a cage. Not because someone locked the door, but because leaving would require effort they've trained themselves to avoid. Becoming a monster means recognizing this pattern and interrupting it. Control is not about rigidity. It's about intention. It's about deciding in advance who you will be when things don't go your way. Because life has a way of testing your values at the worst possible times, when you're tired, when you're stressed, when the stakes are high and the margin for error is thin. In those moments, you don't rise to your ideals. You default to your habits. That's why habits matter more than motivation. Motivation is emotional. Habits are structural. Motivation fades when conditions change. Habits persist because they remove decision-making from the equation. The monster understands this and builds systems that support the person they are trying to become, not the person they used to be. This is where many people get stuck. They rely on willpower and call it discipline. But willpower is a limited resource. It drains under stress. Discipline, on the other hand, is designed. It's built into routines, environments, and commitments that make the right choice easier and the wrong choice harder. Control, then, is not about resisting temptation endlessly. It's about reducing exposure to it in the first place. The monster is strategic about energy. They know when to push and when to recover. They understand that burnout is not a badge of honor. It's a warning sign. Pushing without purpose leads to collapse. Rest without intention leads to stagnation. Control is finding the balance that allows you to sustain effort over the long term. Sustainability is often overlooked in conversations about strength. We celebrate intensity, not endurance. We praise sacrifice, not stewardship. But the strongest people are not the ones who burn brightest for a moment. They are the ones who remain steady over time. They can carry the weight because they've learned how to distribute it. This requires self-awareness. Self-awareness allows you to notice when ego is driving a decision instead of values. It allows you to pause before reacting. It allows you to choose response over impulse. Without self-awareness, strength becomes reckless. With it, strength becomes precise. And precision is powerful. Precision means you don't waste energy fighting the wrong battles. You don't engage in every conflict. You don't need to be right all the time. You know what matters and what doesn't. You know when to speak and when to stay silent. You know when to act and when to wait. This level of discernment only comes from reflection, from taking the time to examine your actions honestly, from asking yourself uncomfortable questions. Why did I react that way? What was I protecting? What was I afraid of losing? These questions are not meant to induce guilt. They are meant to create clarity. Clarity simplifies decisions. When your values are clear, choices become easier even when they're hard. You don't debate whether to take the shortcut. You don't justify behavior that conflicts with who you want to be. You may still feel the pull of comfort, but you no longer mistake it for what you need. Needs and wants are not the same. Comfort satisfies wants. Control serves needs, and long-term needs often require short-term discomfort. This is the trade-off the monster accepts without resentment, not because it enjoys suffering, but because it understands the cost of avoidance. Avoidance feels safe, but it accumulates interest. The longer you avoid what needs to be addressed, the heavier it becomes. Conversations become conflicts, small weaknesses become failures, ignored responsibilities become crises. Control is addressing things early while they are still manageable. This applies not just to work or ambition, but to character. When you ignore small compromises, they don't stay small, they stack. They reshape your identity. You become someone who bends, then someone who rationalizes, then someone who no longer recognizes the line they once refused to cross. Becoming a monster is drawing that line clearly and protecting it relentlessly, not aggressively, deliberately. Deliberate people are hard to manipulate. They don't chase every opportunity. They don't react to every provocation. Hey, don't confuse urgency with importance. They move with intention, guided by a sense of purpose that is internal, not reactive. And purpose at this stage is not about ambition. It's about contribution, about asking, what is this strength for? Because strength that exists only to serve the self eventually collapses under its own weight. Strength that serves something larger endures. This is where the monster becomes a guardian rather than a threat. A guardian of standards, a guardian of trust, a guardian of stability when others panic. In uncertain times, people don't look for the loudest voice. They look for the steadiest presence. They look for someone who doesn't overreact, who doesn't disappear, who doesn't abandon their values when it becomes inconvenient. That steadiness is not accidental. It is built through thousands of small choices where control was chosen over comfort, where discipline was chosen over indulgence, where long-term integrity was chosen over short-term relief. So becoming a monster in its final form is not about intimidation or fear. It's about becoming someone whose internal world is so well governed that external chaos loses its power over you. You are not easily shaken. You are not easily provoked. You are not easily swayed. And that is not because you are cold or detached. It is because you are grounded. Grounded in values, grounded in discipline, grounded in purpose. That kind of monster doesn't need to announce itself. It is felt in its consistency, its restraint, and its quiet strength. At the end of all of this, becoming a monster is not about becoming someone unrecognizable. It is about finally becoming honest with who you are capable of being. It is about refusing to live beneath your potential while calling it humility. It is about understanding that strength, when guided by values, is not something to fear, it is something to respect. This journey was never about domination, aggression, or ego. It was about responsibility, about choosing discipline over excuses, control over comfort, and purpose over impulse. Because the truth is, life will demand more from you than you think you are ready for. It always does. And when that moment comes, wishing you were stronger will not help. Preparation will. Becoming a monster means doing the work long before the moment arrives. It means building habits that support your future self. It means developing emotional control so your reactions don't betray your values. It means earning self-trust through consistency, not motivation. And over time, that self-trust becomes confidence, not loud, not arrogant, but calm and unshakable. It also means anchoring your strength to something bigger than yourself. Strength without purpose eventually turns destructive. Discipline without meaning becomes empty. But when your capability exists to protect, to build, to serve, and to lead with integrity, it transforms into something rare, something necessary, something that makes the people around you feel safer, not smaller. The world does not need more reckless power. It does not need louder voices or faster reactions. It needs people who are prepared, people who can endure pressure without collapsing or corrupting, people who can hold authority without abusing it, people who can remain steady when chaos invites panic. That is the monster worth becoming. A monster who chooses restraint over reaction. A monster who values consistency over recognition. A monster who stands firm in their principles even when no one is watching. Because when you know your strength, you no longer need to prove it. When you trust your discipline, you are no longer ruled by emotion. And when your actions align with your values, you stop chasing approval and start building impact. So don't run from the intensity inside you. Don't suppress the edge that wants more. Shape it, train it, govern it. Let it become a force that serves something meaningful. Become strong enough to be kind, disciplined enough to be free, dangerous enough to be trusted. That is what it truly means to become a monster.